In today's video, we're finally finishing off US 50 by covering US 50 through West Virginia, Maryland, Virginia, and Washington D.C. And we're also going to see how inconsistent Maryland DOT is assigning its control cities. Here is where we left off in the US 50 Midwestern video at the Ohio and West Virginia border. Also, if you haven't seen the US 50 Western or Midwestern videos, you should check those out after you finish this one, the link in the description. When we meet West Virginia 892, we're still assigned east for Parkersburg. When we meet I-77, we're now assigned east for Clarksburg. On the mileage sign, Ellenboro is on the third line in 27 miles, Pennsboro is our secondary in 32, and Clarksburg is our primary in 68. In Clarksburg, we meet US 19, and we're now assigned east for Bridgeport. When we meet I-79, we're still assigned east for Bridgeport. In Bridgeport, we meet West Virginia 76, and we're now assigned east for Grafton. On the mileage sign, Grafton is the only city on it in 13 miles. On the mileage sign after Grafton, Romney is now our control city in 88 miles, while Red House, Maryland is our secondary in 38. And here is where we make our brief foray into Maryland until later. When we meet US 219, we're still assigned east for Romney. On the mileage sign, Gorman is our secondary in 6 miles, and Romney is now only 49 miles away. And here we are crossing back into West Virginia over the North Branch Potomac River. This is legit the tiniest West Virginia state welcome sign I've ever seen. In Romney, we meet West Virginia 28, and we're now signed east for Winchester. On the mileage sign, Capon Bridge is our secondary in 8 miles, and Winchester is our primary in 28. We're now crossing into Virginia, and this is also the first time we're crossing into it on this channel. In Winchester, we meet US 522 and 11, and we're now running concurrent with them southbound, and we have no control cities. And also because why not, US 17 just decides to randomly spawn in because it feels like it. When US 11 leaves us, we're now signed for 2 I-81. When we meet I-81, we don't receive a single control city. When US 522 leaves us, it is signed south for the airport on Front Royal, and we're now signed for Warrenton and Washington D.C. Warrenton is for US 17 and Washington D.C. is for US 50. When US 17 leaves us, it is still signed south for Warrenton, and we're now signed east for Fairfax and Washington D.C. This should actually be Stonebridge because it's faster to take US 17 to get to Fairfax and Washington D.C. from here. On the mileage sign, Upperville is on the third line in 4 miles, Fairfax is our secondary in 35, and Washington D.C. is our primary in 51. Again, this should just be Stonebridge. Past Stonebridge, we meet Virginia 28, and we're now signed east for Fairfax, which now it's fine. When we meet I-66, we're still signed east for Fairfax. When we meet US 29, it is now running concurrent with us, and we have no control cities, but I think it's fine since there's really nothing you can sign without it being better to take I-66 to get there. When US 29 leaves us, neither of the highways have any control city at all whatsoever. When we meet I-495, the Capital Beltway serving the Washington D.C. metro area, we're now signed east for Arlington Boulevard in Arlington. When we meet Virginia 27, we're now signed east for Washington D.C. again, this time it's actually good. We are about to join I-66, still signed east for Washington D.C., but there is zero mention of it on the sign. We're now crossing over the Potomac River into Washington D.C. When US 50 leaves I-66, signed east for East Street, we're now signed east for Constitution Avenue in downtown, but it'd actually be faster to stay on I-66 till East Street to get to downtown from here. Here, we just passed north of the Lincoln Memorial. Over there in the distance, we can see the White House as we pass south of it. And if you turn around, you can also see the Washington Monument as well. At the end of I-395, we have no control cities. However, though, this should be Annapolis signed here. We're now crossing over the Anacostia River back into Maryland for real this time, though. In Maryland, we're now signed for Annapolis, Richmond, and 2 I-295. Annapolis is for US 50 and Richmond is for I-295. And here is our exit for 2 I-295 for Richmond. When we meet I-495 again on the other side of the metro, we're still signed east for Annapolis. Immediately after the interchange with I-495, we have now become unsigned I-595, and here we meet US 301, and we're now running concurrent with it for Annapolis and 2 I-97 for Baltimore. When I-97 ends, we're still signed for Annapolis, but we're now also signed for the Bay Bridge. When we meet Maryland 450, we're now solely signed for the Bay Bridge. We're now crossing over the Chesapeake Bay via the Bay Bridge. When we meet Maryland 8, we're now signed for Easton. 1, this should be Salisbury, and 2, this is where the inconsistencies begin. When US 50 leaves US 301, side north for Wilmington, we're now signed east for Ocean City. 1, what happened to Easton? 2, why is Salisbury skipped? And 3, this should be Salisbury. I know it's not as well known, but it should still be signed first. On the mileage sign, Salisbury is our secondary in 64 miles, and Ocean City is our primary in 94. Salisbury should be signed first, then Ocean City can be signed afterwards, in my opinion. In Salisbury, we meet US 13, and we're now running concurrently with it for Norfolk and Ocean City. Norfolk is for US 13 and Ocean City is for US 50. When US 50 leaves US 13, both highways have the exact same control cities as they did earlier. And here is US 50's eastern terminus at Maryland 528 in Ocean City. At US 50's eastern beginning, it is signed west for Salisbury. We actually get a cool sign that says Sacramento is 3,073 miles away, which is where the direct opposite end of the highway is located. Likewise, in Sacramento, there's also one for Ocean City. On the mileage sign, though, Salisbury is now our secondary in 22 miles, and the Bay Bridge is our primary in 97. This should still be Salisbury here, though. In Salisbury, we meet US 13 south for Norfolk, and we're now running concurrently with it for the Bay Bridge and Dover. Me, personally, going westbound, I think both the Bay Bridge and Annapolis should be signed, though. When US 13 leaves us, we gain Cambridge as a control city. That should be Annapolis there, not Cambridge. But, of course, on the mileage sign, Cambridge is now our secondary in 21 miles, and Easton's now our primary in 37. What happened to the Bay Bridge? And also, Annapolis should be on the sign as well. Like, where is it? In Easton, we meet Maryland 309, and we're now signed west for the Bay Bridge again. Also, sign Annapolis here as well. We're now crossing over the Chesapeake Bay again via the Bay Bridge. After crossing the Bay Bridge, we're now signed for Washington, D.C. along with US 301. Annapolis should also be signed here, though. At the end of I-97, we're now signed for Richmond and Washington, D.C. Richmond is for US 301, and Washington, D.C. is for US 50. When US 301 leaves us, we have the exact same control cities as we did earlier. When we meet I-495 again, we're still signed west for Washington, D.C. We're now crossing back over the Anacostia River back into Washington, D.C. At the end of I-395, we're now signed west for New York Avenue, downtown, and I-395 alternate. Here, US 50 turns left onto 6th Street, and if you were looking to go to downtown, you'd continue straight on New York Avenue. Here, we pass south of the White House again on Constitution Avenue, and if you turn around, we can see the Washington Monument again. And here's another glimpse of a Lincoln Monument on US 50. We're now joining I-66, and there's not a single mention of US 50 or I-66 here. We're now crossing back over the Potomac River again back into Virginia, and we're now also about to leave I-66 signed west for the Arlington Boulevard. When we meet I-495 in Virginia, we're now signed west for Arlington Boulevard to US 29, the Lee Highway in Fairfax. Here, US 29 joins us, and we have no control cities at all. When US 29 leaves us, we're now signed west for 2 I-66. When we meet I-66 again, we're now signed west for Fair Oaks after Fairfax. When we meet Virginia 28, we're now signed west for Winchester. Here, US 17 joins us, and for some reason, it's concurrent with us till its terminus, so US 17 should definitely end here, but anyways, we're still signed for Winchester. Strangely, on the mileage sign, Winchester becomes our secondary in 18 miles, and Romney is our primary in 63. Winchester should still be the primary here. When we meet I-81, US 522 joins us right before it while we're heading towards Winchester still. In Winchester, US 11 is now also joining the mix. Here, US 50 leaves the mix by turning left onto East Cork Street. When we meet Virginia 37, we're now signed west for Romney again. This time it's fine though. On the mileage sign, Romney is still on the bottom line in 40 miles. And here is our tiny West Virginia State welcome sign again. In Romney, we meet West Virginia 28, and we're now signed west for both Moorfield and Grafton. On the mileage sign, Moorfield is our secondary in 26 miles, and Grafton is our primary in 88. We're now about to briefly cross through Maryland again. When we meet US 219 again, we're still signed west for Grafton. And on the mileage sign, Grafton is now only 38 miles away. After that, we then cross back into West Virginia. After passing through Grafton, we meet US 250, and we're now concurrent with it for Fairmont and Clarksburg. Fairmont is for US 250, and Clarksburg is for US 50. When US 250 leaves us, we're still signed west for Clarksburg. On the mileage sign, Clarksburg is the only city on it in 13 miles. When we meet I-79, we're still signed west for Clarksburg. When we meet US 19, we're now signed west for Parkersburg. On the mileage sign, Pennsboro is our secondary in 24 miles, and Parkersburg is our primary in 59. When we meet I-77, we're now signed west for downtown Parkersburg and Athens. And here we cross over the Ohio River again back into Ohio. The control cities for Eastbound should be Parkersburg, Clarksburg, Bridgeport, Grafton, Romney, Winchester, then Stone Ridge. Don't sign Fairfax and Washington, D.C. yet. Then Fairfax, Arlington can be signed, but it really just depends where you're going in Arlington. Then Washington, D.C., Constitution Avenue, 6th Street, then switch to Annapolis when you turn to New York Avenue. Then Bay Bridge, Salisbury, skip Easton and sign it before Ocean City, and then finally Ocean City. And the control cities for westbound should be Salisbury, then Annapolis, and the Bay Bridge. They'll only sign the Bay Bridge. Then Washington, D.C. and Annapolis don't only sign Washington, D.C. Then Washington, D.C. by itself after Annapolis, then downtown Washington, D.C. Then 6th Street when you leave New York Avenue, then Arlington when you turn onto Constitution Avenue, then Fairfax, then 2 I-66, then Fair Oaks, Winchester when you meet Virginia 28, then Romney, Grafton, Clarksburg, Parkersburg, and finally Athens. If you enjoyed the US 50 videos, check my community tab to vote on the poll of if you want to see a US 50 supercut for Eastbound and Westbound, and we also have the same poll running in mine and Geography Train's Discord server where we also do daily US cities, US counties, and 3-digit interstates. If you enjoyed today's video, please subscribe. I also have others on my channel where I cover more US highways, and I also cover interstates and state highways, and I also look into control cities to see if they are worthy of control city sets. Anyways, see you guys next time. Bye!